Okay, so all these scenes in Act 5 are quite short, but Scene 3 is a really interesting scene. Once again, we jump back to Dunsinane Castle, and we finally get a look at Macbeth in Act 5, what Macbeth's state of mind is, and how things are going. And interestingly, it opens with this line, "Bring me no more reports." This is a king who is preparing for battle. And he's saying, don't tell me anything else. Bring me no more reports about what's going on. Now, this implies two things which run through the entire scene. One of them is a sense of fearlessness. He's been told that he can't be defeated by the witches, so he doesn't care. But there's also, underneath that, a sense of desperation. And it depends so much on the actor who decides to perform this, which one they want to really highlight. Because there's a bit of both in there. There's that courage and fearlessness of Macbeth, but there's also this idea of desperation of like, bring me no more reports. I can't see any more reports because the army out there is, for all numbers, clearly going to defeat us. But he then says, till Birnam Wood removed to Dunsinane, so what the witches predicted, till the wood gets up and actually moves to the castle, I cannot taint with fear. He has no fear. But note how much he relies on the prophecies. Now, you'll note that this scene actually opens and closes with him reiterating one of the prophecies. This one, second line, is till Birnam Wood removed to Dunsinane. He's so focused on these prophecies. They're the one thing keeping him going. And then he repeats here, what's the boy Malcolm? Was he not born of woman? The spirits that know all mortal consequences have pronounced me thus. Fear not, Macbeth. No man that's born of woman shall ever have power upon thee. So he's convinced that he's safe in this situation. He's convinced, but it's so reliant on those prophecies. That's all he has left. Another thing we start to see in this scene is we start to see that tyrant side of Macbeth that everybody has been talking about. He treats servants so horribly. He has complete contempt for people below him. A servant appears and he just starts screaming at him. The devil damn thee black, thou cream-faced loon. Where gots thou goose look? Just for appearing, just for showing up. And so Macbeth is really kind of, you can tell how on edge he is in this situation. And this continues as the servant tells him there's 10,000 soldiers, and he just screams and shouts at him. And then he calls for Satan, who is someone who works under him, one of his lords. And look how he shouts, Satan, I am sick at heart when about Satan, I say. This push will cheer me ever, or deceit me now. You'll see that language is falling apart, a little bit like Lady Macbeth's language was falling apart as well. Similar sorts of things happening there. However, not quite as much as Lady Macbeth. He still retains what's going on. And there's almost a bit where we pity him here in this scene. And a really good actor can do it really well. Where he says, I have lived long enough. My way of life is fallen into the seer. The yellow leaf that should accompany old age as honour, love, obedience, troops of friends, I must not look to have. And he accepts this about himself. He accepts that for the things that he has done, he is not going to have these nice things that come with old age. He's not going to have honour, he's not going to have love, he's not going to have troops of friends, and he shouldn't even expect to have them. He kind of gives up on them a little bit. And that, in a ways, is tragedy. Because when he turns completely to the witches, when he has that kind of blood will have blood moment, he kind of deep down knows that he's giving up on anything good. And he's just kind of forced to accept that at this point in time. That's Macbeth's tragedy, that he's just forced to accept that he's given up on, by embracing the darkness, he's given up on everything that's light and happy in the world. Except for one last thing, which we'll look at in a moment. He's still a warrior. He's still completely and utterly the courageous hero that we saw at the very beginning of this play. We see that here. I'll fight till my till from my bones my flesh be hacked. And he does go on to do that later in the act, right? So he's still courageous, and he's still that kind of fearless warrior that we see. But the one thing that he does ask is, he calls the doctor and he says, "How goes your patient, doctor?" It's for his wife. And the doctor says, "Not so sick, my lord, as she is troubled with thick-coming fancies that keep her from rest." And Macbeth says, in his kind of imperative statement, because he's king and this is what he does now, "Cure her of that." And he asks, "Canst thou not minister to a mind diseased, pluck from the memory a rooted sorrow, raise out the written troubles of the brain, and with some sweet oblivious antidote cleanse the stuffed bosom of that perilous stuff which weighs upon the heart?" And that's a real deep existential question that he's asking, not just to the doctor, but to himself. Is there any way to cleanse the perilous stuff which weighs upon the heart? And that's the big question that Lady Macbeth has been struggling with all play, and that Macbeth's been struggling with all play. It's the big question Shakespeare asks us, that when we do these terrible things, is there any way to cleanse that from our hearts? And I think the answer is no. Certainly for Lady Macbeth, the answer is no. But he does stick to it. He continues to say, "If thou couldst, doctor, cast the water of my land, find her disease and purge it to a sound and pristine health, I would applaud thee to the very echo that should applaud again." He's in the midst of this battle. He's begging the doctor to make his wife better. And so the last thing that he kind of has in this world, even though he knows he's got no future, even though he knows he's not got anything, is his wife, whom he still loves. And as the scene ends, he returns back to the one thing that's keeping him going in this battle, which is the prophecy. "I will not be afraid of death and bane till Burnham Forest come to Dunsinane." And so that it frames the scene, and we see that all this fearlessness and desperation and everything like that is in Macbeth is standing on the pillars of those prophecies. That's the only thing that makes him think that there's anything continuing to fight on for, because he thinks that's his fate, right? Not to be defeated. And there's this little line from the doctor at the end where, aside, he says, "Were I from Dunsinane away and clear, profit again should hardly draw me near." Basically, if I wasn't here right now, there is no money that would put me in this situation. There is no money on earth. He's just a little recognition that the Macbeths are crazy, and he wish he did not take this job. I think it's important also to note that in both scenes in this act, scene 1 and scene 3, where we have seen one of the Macbeths, we have also seen a doctor. The same doctor. And I think that's symbolic of the idea that has been said multiple times in this play, that they are a sickness that needs healing in Scotland. That Scotland is sick and Scotland needs healing. And by healing, that means removing the festering wound that is the Macbeths. And that's highlighted here by the fact that both times we see Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, there is a doctor with them. Also, I want to point out that we talked earlier on in the play how we see an increasing separation between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. How at the beginning they're so close together, they're making all their plans together. How when we first see Lady Macbeth, she's literally reading Macbeth's words, that partner in greatness, all of that kind of stuff. And then they start to kind of hide things from each other, and they start to lie to each other, and they start to grow further and further apart. And in Act 5, they don't even share a scene together. They're never on stage together in Act 5. And I think that's a key structural thing to be aware of as well. The way Shakespeare represents that separation by having Macbeth and Lady Macbeth being never on stage together at all. Despite the fact that Macbeth still really cares for her. Right. End scene.